I'm back. Hello. Hi. Why is my eye watering? Hello? So much is happening right now. Oh my god. Hello, ambulance. Hello, book reading friends. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel, and today, A, I'm back. Hello. And 2, we are here to talk all about my best books of 2021. Now, if you guys know, I took a week's off break. It was much needed. Ever since I've started my channel, I have not taken a single break, and I was reaching the point of burnout slowly but surely, and I was really like in this mindset of I'm so burnt out, I can't even tell that I'm burnt out. So having a week off, completely disconnected from social media, was exactly what I needed. And now I'm back, the creative juices are flowing, and I am so excited for everything that's to come in this year, which again, Happy New Year too, because I didn't even say that when I left and I dropped off the face of the earth. This is a video that I've been really anticipating. In fact, I made this list before I went on break, and not only was I, 1, very surprised at the result, but B, just completely in shock about the results. So it was a really eye-opening moment as to what my favorite book of the year was. Before I even start, I do want to ask, just plainly out of curiosity, leave a comment down below. What do you think is going to be my favorite book of the year? All in all, really excited to talk to you guys, really excited to be back. And also, before I get started with the video, I need to give a massive thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Ren. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Ren, but I am particularly so excited to be partnering up with them today and talking about something that directly impacts all of us. I think at this point, none of us are strangers to the topic of climate change and how in particular our lifestyles directly impacts this ever-growing issue. Most times when we address this particular subject, I think we generally think about big corporations and how gas and coal and gasoline and oil all make an impact on this. However, it can go as small as what we do in our own household that directly impacts climate change in a negative way. It can be something as relatively small as a stovetop or windowless areas. Crowded rooms are a big part of that too. Ren is here to help in that regard. Not only is Ren a super simple but effective way to make a direct difference into the climate change crisis, but also makes it super easy to calculate within their website how big your carbon footprint is and gives you options on how to reduce it in a variety of different areas like tree planting, mineral weathering, and rainforest protection. After answering a series of questions on their website and calculating your carbon footprint, it'll give you active steps towards offsetting it. The reality is that there is no way to bring it down to zero, but you can offset what you have left after you reduce. How it works is that you sign up and you define what monthly contribution you want to make. And once you do, you'll receive monthly updates, and this is the part that I love, from the projects that you're supporting, and they'll send you actual live footage and pictures of how your carbon offset is going. One ongoing project that Ren has going right now is the tech-enabled Amazon rainforest protection. This one is set particularly in Peru, and the reason why I love this one so much is because it gives indigenous Amazonians the tools they need to protect their rainforest. And so if you do want to sign up to Ren, I will be leaving my link at the top of the description. And this is the most amazing part: for the first 100 people who click the link and sign up, there will be 10 extra trees planted in your name. So thank you so much to Ren for sponsoring this video, and without further ado, let's get right started into the best books of 2021. All right, friends, let's get into the juicy stuff. For the first honorable mention, I have a book that kind of snuck up on me. I was not expecting to either A, love this book as much as I did, and B, really, again, resonate with this, and for it to have made this list, especially because the format that it's in, and also because I read it so late into the year. This was one of the last few books that I squeezed into 2021, and that is Homebody by Ruby Kaur. I knew I was going to like it to some degree, I just didn't know how, and I really just fell in love with Ruby's writing and the structure really of her poems. So this is a poetry collection. This one is centered so much on what happens on the inside, which, I mean, poetry in general tends to be very introspective. This, I think, resonated with me on so many different levels, about identity, about how you struggle to really come to terms with your body and really fall in love with it and love it as it should be loved, about work and overworking yourself and what it means to be successful but still take rest, and finding balance in life, and broken friendships and made friendships and love. There are just so many incredible themes in this one, and I found myself constantly nodding along. And I think the reason why I loved this so much in particular was because at the time where I was reading this, which was right before my break, I kind of needed, I guess, not necessarily validation, but I did need in so many ways for somebody to kind of slap me in the face and be like, girl, you're so fucking crazy. Sit down, listen to me. This is where we're at. Please acknowledge it. Please sit down. Please take a break. Especially especially in the later half of the year, I think my mind and body and self just completely all disconnected from each other, for as abstract as that sounds. And so this one was really, and the back does say it, after feeling disconnected for so long, my mind and body are finally coming back to each other, home buddy. And that's exactly what this is about. It's just making sure that you are a whole essence of a being and that every single aspect of you is acknowledged, accepted, and loved, and again, the way that it should be loved. And so again, at the time, it was exactly what I needed from a poetry collection, and it just gave me everything that I didn't know I needed or wanted, and that I didn't know I need and wanted at the time. Another one that didn't quite make the list, but it is in the honorable mentions, is Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. Now last year, well, actually the year before that, because we're already in 2022. So in 2020, my favorite book of the year was These Violent Delights. It was a book that took me by surprise, a book that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. And this one, although it is a massive favorite that I read last year, I think when I looked at every other contender for the list, I just knew that this wasn't quite up there, but it was still a really good one that I had to talk about. And this duology is truly a masterpiece in my eyes. I think it has a lot that people wouldn't necessarily love. It's very political, and it's literally a political statement. When you look at the grand scale of what the story is really about, you have themes of racism and colonialism. There's so much just juice and meat in here that when you look at the basis and the grounds of the story, it's really just a historical piece, and that's what I love so much about this. When you add the Romeo and Juliet element into this, it just adds a level of complexity and dynamics that elevates the story a lot. I particularly really enjoyed the romance in this too. I think when you look at enemies to lovers as a trope, it tends to not be enemies to lovers, but this one truly shows what enemies to lovers is about. It is a vicious cycle, and you go from hating each other to loving each other to hating each other again, because you've been kind of groomed and taught your entire life to hate a certain someone. And so I really like the approach to this particular trope, because it was very refreshing versus every other thing that is on the YA shelf right now, at least that I've read so far. The final messages of the book of the monster is not really the actual monster, but the people that reside in this country, that reside in this era, that do the horrible things that they do. It was such an incredible kind of message, and the way that it was subverted to fit the story was also really masterfully done. So all in all, I really enjoyed this one. Clearly, that was to nobody's surprise. Now we are entering the juicy segment of this video, and we're gonna count up, technically down, up, down. Technically it's down, but also up. However, number 10 is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. You guys know I read middle grade every once in a while. I love middle grade. I think it still has a lot of lessons even for adults. Amari in particular is a book that felt so unique, because not only are obviously the main characters POCs, but also the messages of strength and love and acceptance and just moving past prejudice. And I love the way that B.B. Alston presents it in this book, where it's not necessarily an overt thing every single time, but it's down even to what sort of magic Amari possesses. And it's just another show of people just criticize and judge on so many levels, and if we just kind of embraced each other as we were, life would just be so much better. And so I love that part of it. I also love the magic system for Amari. I think it's so unique. I think it's so well built, and it genuinely seems so grand. And the way that it's explained, it's obviously super easy to understand, but it literally feels like a warm hug when you walk into this book. And then when you find out all the ins and outs of the magic system, how all of these different institutions work, and how magic works in this world too, it's literally so immersive, and you lose yourself in it, and there is so much to give that you almost kind of want to be a part of the story. Like, I was reading this and I was like, can I be in the bureau? Like, can I just be a part of this? And I think generally speaking, the lessons Amari had to go through and the lessons she taught other people were, again, one of the best parts of this book, and I just love it. For number 11. I think we didn't expect this book to be at number 11. It's Strange the Dreamer. I genuinely thought at one point of the year that this book was gonna be number 1, and it's obviously not, but my feelings and my opinions about this book still remain the same. I love every second of this. It is a slow burn lyrical story. It is beautiful. It really talks about one's resilience to find out who you really are, where you really come from, what your destiny on this earth is, about feelings of inadequacy and not not being underestimated by the people surrounding you, about proving your worth not only to other people, yes, but mostly to yourself. I think those are the core lessons of Strange. I love how immersive also the world is. I think Laini Taylor is a masterful world builder that again make you lose yourself in the story. As you read this, you want to be a part of the Citadel, which I mean, if you do, you can click the link down below, but you genuinely want to be a part of the Citadel, and you genuinely want to be a part of this something bigger, and you want to find out exactly what's happening in the world, where is this going, and what the plot twist is going to be. And I genuinely found it so difficult to even figure out. I couldn't do it, and so that part I love. The very end of this book has got to be one of the most soul-crushing endings to anything that I've ever read or consumed or watched or anything, and I was so emotionally connected to these characters, which was the most important part that I did not want to let go. And so both this and Muse, which is its sequel, like the duology in general could fit in this space because it's just so freaking beautiful. I love it so much. At my number 10th spot, the official one, not the fake one, the official one, I have Skyward. I had such a fantastic time reading Skyward. It was like my first official sci-fi, even though it is within the YA section, still sci-fi, but I love Spencer, and that is no surprise to anyone because I've talked about Spencer before here on my channel. I love her as a protagonist. I love how flawed she is. I love how she grows and recedes and grows and recedes, and that is just normal human behavior. Sometimes you get better and sometimes something happens and it makes you go back inside yourself like a turtle. And so that back and forth just seemed so human and genuine to me as I was reading the story. And although I did have a difficult relationship with her because at first I hated her and I wanted to punch her in the face, she generally grew on me so much that she is one of my favorite heroines of all time. And the world that they live in too, it's so futuristic yet so realistic, and that's the part that I love about Sanderson's stories, is the fact that for as outlandish as the concept is and for as grand as it is, it doesn't seem all that impossible. And so between her conviction and the world that they live in and the struggle that they are currently dealing with, it was just such a compelling story. And not only that, what I found with this book is that Spencer was, yes, lovable and likable, but everybody around her was also such a stellar character, which again shines very true with Sanderson, because what he does is that he just built a crew of characters that genuinely make you feel at home and you fall in love with every single one of them. And so not only was I invested in her, but I was invested in every single one of the Skyward Flight, which was fantastic. Safe to say that the battle scenes in this one were also incredible. There is a lot of them, but I personally, as somebody who loves action movies, who likes sci-fi movies, I had no issue picturing what was happening and no issue keeping up. I was also listening to some sci-fi music and it really took me there, some Interstellar, if you know what I mean. And it genuinely just built up just the feeling of tension and dread that goes down in this book. And so for those reasons, it's funny because I've been watching Shark Tank all week long and I wanted to say, and for those reasons, I'm out. But that's irrelevant. Point is, I'm in. Like, I like it. I love it. And I can't wait to read the third one this year. At my number 9th spot, I have Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Now, another one that really took me by surprise. I was even not intending to read this book. Not necessarily never, but at least not last year. And I was in the search of an audiobook and I found it on Libby and I was like, why not? Let's give it a try. And I instantly fell in love with the narration, with the story, and how big of a statement it is and what big of an impact it has generally caused in society. And learning about all of that really was a beautiful experience. I personally will say, if you're intending to read this book, have a physical copy, but get a hold of the audiobook, which I know sounds like such a hassle to have both. But if you annotate like me and you want to keep track of those quotes and those statements and that information that can come in handy at some point, it is very worthwhile to be listening and then annotating as you go. And that's what I wish I had done. But the audiobook though, it's narrated by the author, so you know that when the words are delivered, they'll hit as they need to hit, and you can genuinely see how much pain this whole process cost the author and how this was a cathartic moment for her and a moment of healing. And truly what it came down with this book was the social commentary about rape culture and how it makes it so difficult for the victim to come forward and to have a fair judicial process within the system, because the victims are villainized and then the aggressor is victimized. And so there's just so much nuance to this particular conversation that I think Chanel Miller brought it forth in the best manner possible. There are just so many moments with within the story that have stuck with me and still kind of haunt me in a way that I didn't expect. So it's obviously a heavy read, but I think it's genuinely worth every single second and it'll probably stick with me forever. At number 8, I have a not so surprising one, but honestly I did think this was gonna make top 5. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I feel like it's gonna become a pattern with me saying I thought this was gonna be top 5 or I didn't expect this to be here at all, and that's just where we've landed with this video. People We Meet on Vacation took me by surprise because not only A, was I not planning on reading this, but when it got here, because it was a book of the month pick, I generally got excited and then I read it right away, fell in love with it right away. Also, it was my first Emily Henry, and given the reviews for Beach Read, which are, it's kind of like split in the middle, I guess. I was gonna say it's polarizing, but it's not. Kind of split in the middle where people really loved it or really hated it, and there's just people that went meh, like it's fine, I guess. People We Meet on Vacation though, for me was stellar, and even though I read Beach Read last year as well, this one still shines brighter in my eyes than Beach Read because of the trope in here, and this is best friends to lovers. It is not something that I'm quite used to reading for a number of reasons. It also is something that hits kind of closer to home for me. So I've never necessarily sought out this trope before, but it just worked in here. And it worked here because the synergy and chemistry between Poppy and Alex was just so good. And it actually shows you the process of them going from really good friends into that headspace of, oh shit, I think I'm into you, but like I know that I shouldn't. And that is, for the most part, I think a lot of people have experienced something that is inevitable sometimes when you're friends with someone. And so I really like the way that it was depicted in this book. I also like the fact that Emily Henry not only makes her romances a romance, but she also includes contemporary elements in them, because I think it works so well to balance out the story, to really understand who these characters are, where they come from, and why they act the way that they do, and how they react in certain situations. I think it adds a lot of context to the story. I also think for this one in particular, what I really liked is the message of you can't really fix people, especially people who don't want to be fixed. And at the end of the day, it's due to everybody involved to take care of themselves and not rely on someone else to do it for them. And so that part of it in this book was so really well done. I just think Emily Henry understands people and she understands relationships, and that's why they come across so wonderfully in her stories, and that's why I enjoyed this so much. I really like the slow burn aspect of this as well. It's not something that you start the story and they're instantly banging, but it generally takes some time to build up to and for you to understand why they evade each other like the plague, and then when they finally get together, it's like, oh my god, finally you guys did it. Well, if you would guess by the empty spot on my bookshelf right now, you'd be able to guess that the next one is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Another book that really snuck up on me. I knew this was going to be on the favorites list of this year. There was no doubt about it. I think this book just snuck up on me after and during my read. Not only is the romance in this absolutely top tier, it is a bit on the insta-lovey, very fastly paced side, but it works for the story. I think when you talk about vampires and witches, it is a bit more forgiving than in a contemporary setting, and so for that matter, you know, I'm fine with it. But not only is that part great in this book, but I love the fact that Deborah Harkness is a historian first and foremost, and every historical element of this book just made so much sense within this context. The alchemical sciencey side of this also made a lot of sense, and those were two things that I never thought I'd find myself saying that I love, and that was honestly what kept me hooked in this book. Like, beyond the romance, I was there because I was like, oh my god, the Ashmole 782, and oh my god, the alchemical marriage, and oh my god, I was just so intrigued by things that I'd never really cared about before. And that's when you know you have a good writer at hand, is when somebody can make you highly interested in something that you generally don't give a fuck about. And that was my experience with The Discovery of Witches. It was genuinely so freaking good, and the world building in this was also fantastic. I love kind of this struggle and back and forth between Matthew and Diana, her being like, yo, but like, let's get laid, and he's like, but no, boo, how about we wait? And so it was really great to see it from a male's perspective of like, I don't want to move that fast. We've got all the time in the world to figure this out. And also in the matter of figuring things out, I also really liked Diana kind of coming to terms with the fact that she is a witch and there is nothing she can do about that, and it is literally unavoidable, and every circumstance around her is telling her that avoiding it is unavoidable. And so I loved that part of it, because not only do you have a compelling world and storyline, but you also have a very compelling character development from Diana's end. And so I love every second of this. I still need to finish the second one. One that I think not a lot of us will be surprised by, and much like Strange the Dreamer, this is a book that I talk about in conjunction to its sequel because it is a duology. At number 6, I do have Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This book is perfect to me. It had every single element that I wanted from a story like this. It feels like a K-drama. You've got incredible familial dynamics, not only on the heroine side, but also on the hero side. Got both of them dealing with very different status quos on their homes. You've got Mi-young, who her mother, it's just a different breed, quite literally, but her mother is a very forceful person. You've got a mother that is very much of an authoritarian figure. She kind of rules Mi-young's life in whatever way she sees fit, and Mi-young should be living her life for her mom because otherwise she wouldn't be where she is. And so a lot of Mi-young's journey is to figure out who she is as an individual past her mother. And then you've got Ji-hoon on the opposite end of things, where his familiar dynamic is very much broken. There is no dad or no mom on the picture. He lives with his Halmyeoni, and so for him it's mostly trying to come to terms with this abandonment issue that he has and really struggling to have this sense of found family in a way that feels feasible and factable for him. And so that part of it I love. I love again how each of them are struggling with their own things, but they both have lessons to learn and they both are kind of there to facilitate that for each other and to show each other that there is more to the world than meets the eye. The lore in this is also something that I found completely fascinating. Gumiho and Dokaibi, everything was just so well put together and explained and well thought out within this context. There's also the romance. The sidekicks are also so hilarious and they're dynamic with each other, also really fantastic. So just had a lot of great things going for it, and there's also a lot of action within the story and a lot of plot twists within the story, a lot of emotions running high in the story. I did cry reading this, and I wish there were more. I just wish there were like 5 entries, 10 entries to this world. And so, you know, maybe Kat Cho will rethink her life choices one day and be like, oh my god, Mel is right, we need more. We are entering number 5, top 5 entries to this list. I cannot explain to you. I was really excited to read this when I started it, but I generally didn't expect to love this as much as I did, and for a myriad of reasons. I think primarily growing up obviously in a Hispanic country household, my first language is Spanish, I am Panamanian. I never really had great experiences reading books in Spanish for school. I think that's the experience that everybody usually carries out when it comes to literature. However, my school was never really good at picking out the books that we read, and we missed out on a ton of books that we should have read but we didn't, and this was definitely one of them, and that is La Sombra del Viento by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I think I wasn't expecting to love this. I also read this in Spanish and I didn't know how that was going to go in terms of my reading experience, because usually when I tend to read books in Spanish, again, I have that sense of I hate doing this and I don't want to do it, and so I'm gonna hate it. It's not necessarily a lyrically written story, but it felt lyrical at times. I also think, and this was maybe not the intention for the author, but this is one of those books that toes the line between fantasy and reality so well that you never really know if this book is only literary fiction and historical fiction, or if it's actually supernatural and has some element of fantasy. And because of that, I think is why I fell in love so much with this book, because as I was reading this, I was trying to figure out what the heck was happening and why things were happening the way they were and what truly was happening. In reality, everything is embedded in reality. And so that kind of mind play that I suffered as I was reading this book was really good. Again, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's what ended up happening for me. I will also say what I loved about this book was that some things were predictable, some things were definitely not. Some plot twists were twists. However, as I was reading this, I was like, oh, I got you, I'm onto you, I know what's gonna happen, I know it's there, and I was right. And then instantly something hit me, and it was something completely unexpected, and I loved that, because even though at times it was predictable, it still had ways of surprising you in a really, really good way. Besides that, I genuinely think that this book was planned out. I think usually when I think about authors and their writing processes, I think about, is this author a pantser? Are they a plotter? Like, where are we at with this? And this one feels like a very well thought out and planned story. Every character had a purpose to be, a purpose to serve to the story. Everybody had a backstory. Everybody had an explanation as to why they lived the way they did and why they acted the way that they did, and how everything connected at the end felt so beautiful. I think there are also so many mirrors within the story that also worked incredibly well for the narrative and into making it an even more complex story. The way that characters just ended up being, again, different versions of each other was so good within this narrative. I love that at the core of the story is love. It's love in its book, and it's love for books, love for family, love of friends, love of loved ones, and it was just such an incredible journey. I think what a lot of authors try to accomplish, that few of them do, make stories about books and making them hit the way that they should, making people understand why books are so important, why they remain to be so important, and why they're, again, such a relevant piece of literacy, why people love immersing themselves in books the way that they do. And I think Carlos Ruiz Zafón truly captures the essence of that state of mind, of that being, and that's why this book works so well, because it's just so, again, whimsical when it needs to be and not when it doesn't. It's also a very sad story, and at times it feels hopeless, and at the end it's kind of hopeless but not. It's a very, again, intricate narrative that I love. Books were sneaking up on me left and damn right, because I expected to love this book, probably not to this extent, and that is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. If anybody would have made any bets, I would bet that nobody expected me to put a Dostoevsky book in my best books of the year. I certainly didn't expect myself to do this, but this book continues to haunt me, and I don't think it will ever stop haunting me for as long as I live. This book is a masterpiece. At first, when I finished this book, and while I was reading it too, I was kind of wondering, who the fuck would I recommend this book to? Because I would not wish what I experienced to happen to anybody. I genuinely lost my mind as I was reading this, and I was sitting there and I was like, oh my god, what's happening? And I was just slowly but surely losing it. I felt so manic and so anxious as I was reading this that, again, would not wish that experience on anybody. And again, everybody experiences books differently, but listening to the audiobook that I did, I think contributed to the fact that I was just so in it that I felt like I was Radya. And that is not a pretty mindset to be in. Backtracking, digressing into the original point, who would I recommend this to? And it's literally everybody. I would say at least try it out, see if it works out. If you finish it, fantastic. If you don't, then fantastic. But this is something that everybody needs to experience, because again, it's a masterful piece of writing. I think what is so compelling about this book is obviously Radya. Radya is the basis of the story. It is why the story happens and why it continues to be for as long as it is. Radya is a very complex human being, and you can tell that he has a superiority complex and that he genuinely thinks that he is right at all times, and you can tell that he's in a very manic state of mind, and there are so many things contributing to that mindset. However, it was such a compelling thing to read about. I was genuinely there. I was engaged. I wanted to know everything that was happening in this man's head. And what I think structurally worked so well for this book is the fact that oftentimes when we see these sorts of narratives, you see the beginning and end, which is very obvious. You see the crime happen and then you see the result of that, but you never really see what happens in the in-between, because it's very introspective. It's very internal. And I love that we truly dive deep into Radya's thoughts and how he is processing everything that's happening. And so I love that the majority of this book is really the before thought of the crime and then the afterthought of the crime. What happens internally once you make that decision, and then the resolution is the punishment. And so the majority of this book is not even cause and effect. It's literally the process in between. And I think that part of it was so interesting because it was nothing that I'd experienced before. And so this one, again, continues to haunt me, probably forever will. It was so good. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce that we're walking into the top 3 for 2021. Number 3 is Ace of Spades. I don't know if anybody expected this to even be on the list or maybe to be higher on the list. At the point where I'd read this book, I was like, this is my favorite book of all time. It's done it. It will be forever my favorite of the year. Nothing will change. Nothing will top it. There were certainly things that topped it after I read this and finished this. I love the differentiating factor of this though, more than anything. Usually when we read these types of stories, it all comes from almost like this hopeless place of what else can I do but say what happens. But this one was a testament. It was a letter. It was a statement of hope and love, and not all is lost at the end of the day, and there will be people there to support you. There will be causes there to support you, and there will be a community there for you regardless of what happens. And so that part of this book was so beautiful because it didn't feel like a hopeless ride. The main characters of this were also incredibly compelling. I love Chiamaka. I love Devon. They are both just such strong, resilient characters. People who, regardless of what space they are at, they will make space for themselves and make sure that they are heard. And I think that's very inspirational, and I know that a lot of young kids out there will relate to the messages of this book, which is why it's so beautiful, because it allows you to see beyond the scope of what you see in the moment. And so in that regard, the book really did its thing. I love the conversation surrounding race and racism within institutions. I love how it's presented. It not only comes from a place of experience, but it also comes from a place of knowledge and education, and you can very clearly see that. I also love love the ending of this book. It's literally retribution. It's that big sense of retribution and justice in whatever way it needs to come forth, but it will happen. It's almost kind of like the bill will be passed for those who need to pay. And I absolutely loved the ending of this book for that reason. And when you walk into a story like this with its different pitches, I have read Get Out retellings before, reimaginings of the film. And what I love about this one is that it's actually embedded in the story. I think a lot of them nowadays use that term very loosely, and the Get Out elements tend to be very diluted into whatever the story is doing. But in here, you can very clearly tell both mentally and physicality in narrative how the story resembles the film so much, but yet continues to do its own thing. And then pair it up with the Gossip Girl element, which I never would have thought to pair with Get Out. It's so similar. You've got aggressors, you've got stalkers. It's people who do this with ill intent. And so when you grab both of those elements and you put them together, you have a really great ground for a story like this. And truly the tension and the horror and the thriller element in this one were so good, because I genuinely felt so claustrophobic as I was reading this, and every single plot twist just hit where it should and hit like they should, and I loved every second of it. This is the plot twist of the year. Now I know, because I know you guys, and I also know myself, and I know the way that I've talked about books for this past year, and I know everybody and myself was expecting this to be book number 1, and it is not book number 1. It is book number 2. And that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It almost hurts me to say this out loud, and I will put this breakdown because it's heavy. I expected this book to be number 1 because this book kind of, in so many ways, this book represents an ending and a beginning for me. An ending in the sense that I was over shallow world buildings and I was over lazy writing, and a beginning of a reading slump. It was the beginning of the biggest reading slump of my fucking life, and I'm still there, slowly but surely crawling out of the abyss, out of the chasm, if you know what I mean. I genuinely love this book, but I hate this book at the same time. It is a book that I read and fell in love with, and slowly but surely realized that not a lot was going to compare to this. What Sanderson continues to accomplish through every series of his that I've read, through every book that I've read of his, although the books are long, yes, and they are very intimidating, that is the only reason why they're intimidating, because they're long, and you kind of expect such a long book to be very complicated, to be hard to understand, and to be hard to grasp the concepts of the narrative. However, he does all the opposite. He gives you a story that, yes, it's long because it has a lot of components to it, and that, yes, has a lot of complexities, and that has some build-up to do before we actually get to the big thing. It's very easy to understand, and the characters are lovable, and the worlds are expansive, and they're well thought out and well explained. I think, in particular with Way of Kings, yes, the magic system is a little bit more mystical. However, I fell in love with that, and the reason why I think Way of Kings continues to be as high on my list as it is because it has this poetic, almost lyrical quality to it that might not have been intentional at the point in writing. Maybe it was. I won't say never. Maybe I will interview Sanderson at one point in my life. I will not say that it wasn't intentional because I generally don't know. And I love that that's the experience I had with this book. I love the fact that as I read this, I just kind of constantly had this existential crisis trying to figure out what the chapter starters meant, where it was going, how it was all going to connect to the story, and what ultimate reveal it would lead to. I also think with this narrative in particular, it's so long that to me, and you guys know me, I love to play detective as I read books regardless of the genre, I was finding it very difficult to kind of craft theories as I went. There's so much happening that it's literally impossible to do so. So at the end, when you get there, because the book does end on a plot twist, you're like, holy shit, so now what do I do? Except pick up the second one. You pick up the second one. And so I loved literally every second of this. I finished this and I instantly bought every other entry in the series so far because I need to see where it goes. Kaladin is literally my favorite thing of all time, and I love that in a lot of fantasy books, what tends to happen with war is that it's glorified. It's glorified because it makes men so much money, and because it makes people powerful, and because it gives you an advantage against other, countries and areas. However, yes, while all of those things are present in this book in the sense of, yes, it is grand, and yes, it gives people power, and the means to win a war gives people power. However, you see the aftermaths, or the during mats, that's not a word, but you see how states of mind develop because of war, and you see how it actively affects people as they are in the process of war, and that is so perfectly encapsulated with Kaladin. His mental health rep in this book and in the following one, which I have yet to finish, don't act at me. But his rep of mental health is truly fantastic because you can see how it warps the mind of people. I love how every character is three-dimensional. Every character has its own story and nothing is left unexplained. Like even the people who you think are bad or the people who are actually bad, even they have a reason to be the way they are. And that I love because nothing seems kind of just like pulled out of the ass and be like, oh my god, they're evil. No, like it all has an explanation. And so because of that, I love it. Friends, did we expect this to be my favorite book of the year? Maybe yes, maybe not. And I will enter a slight story time before I tell you what the book is. The reason why this ended up being a favorite and how I realized it, I was sitting in a cafe. Why was I so dramatic? I was in a cafe and I was with a friend. We were drinking coffee and it was such a great time. And then I was drafting the books and I realized, oh shit, this is my favorite book of the year. Oh, I loved it so much. It continues to haunt me. I want to reread it so bad and I will in February because I got y'all. Okay, I got you all. I put this up for poll for my Patreon buddy read for February and my patrons pulled through for me because it will be a reread for me because I didn't annotate this book initially and I will, and I'm so excited, and that is Middle Game by Shauna McFire. Love this book with every fiber of my existence. I love how this book kind of taught me to pace myself with reading. Again, I read so many books in the past year and I didn't pace myself with a lot of them. I was very impatient and I wanted to finish books immediately after I started them, which is not realistic. But this book really came here to be like, Mel, light that candle, put that ambience room, sit down, turn off the lights, dim the lights, and literally just read the night away and pace yourself. I am so in love with this story. I am in love with the basis of it and how it explores human experimentation and the means to get scientifically to a certain path of maybe godhood. I love the fact that the story is so abstract at first and also has the trope of a book within a book that you don't really know where it's going. I was sitting there and I was like, is this bitch gonna get anywhere? But like, is something gonna happen? And then slowly but surely you get there and everything comes together and it makes so much sense and you're just sitting there and it feels like a groundbreaking moment of, oh my god. It's also a time traveling story and that adds to the element of dread and the element of tension and that element of everything is doomed and they will never figure this out. They will literally never get out of this time loop, and that part of it I also loved. Like I loved kind of seeing a day go by and then them having to go back. I was just hooked at every freaking turn. I'm kind of like spacing out as I think about this book because I'm like, I loved everything. How do I explain everything? I can't. I love it. It's sci-fi, it's horror-esque in a little way, a small way, but it's got elements of horror and it's super fantasy and I will cry. I love this book and I scored an arc of the second one and this is my favorite book of the year. Like I generally didn't think you would be, Middle Game, but you are. And I love this. I love this. Like, I love this so much that I space out. I love this so much that I can't put it into words. And those were my favorite books of 2021. Who would have thought that this would be the list? I think in so many ways, some of them were predictable, some of them were not. I was certainly not expecting my top 3 to go like that. In fact, I didn't expect most of this list to go like that. However, let me know down below what you guys' favorite books of the year were. What did you enjoy reading the most? Did you guess any of these? Did you think any of these would be on my list? Let me know all of that down in the comments. If you reach the very end of the video, let's also leave a very big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'm constantly uploading videos that I'm sure you do not want to miss. And if you want to support the channel further, if you want extra content, live shows, sprints, book clubs, buddy reads, and all of that good stuff, I do have a Patreon. We call ourselves the Citadel. It is always linked down below. And all I'm gonna say, you should totally join us for February because I am in a mission to make everybody read Middle Game. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. If you want to join us, that is linked down below alongside all of my social medias. Once more, thank you to Ren for sponsoring today's video. For the first 100 people to click the link in my description, 10 extra trees will be planted in your name. And again, it's just a very simple and active and effective way to contribute and make a difference into the climate crisis that we have going on. So again, thank you so much to them for sponsoring this video, and that will be linked at the top of my description. I love you guys so much. I hope everybody's been having a fantastic new year, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.